down on the bottom of the large tank. The lever for my drain hose is closed. I'll just open that up, and you can see that the glycerin just kind of rushed into the hose. And then I just come up to the top and open my one on the top, and it will start to drain. There is approximately 60 gallons of glycerin in the batch. I never measured it exactly, but I know after about 5 batches, my tote is pretty full, or 4 batches, I guess, 4 or 5 batches. But it takes a couple minutes, and after a few minutes of draining the glycerin out, you'll start to see the fuel come up, and I'll bring you back in the adder. I thought I'd cut it off for the morning. Again, you can see the glycerin just falling out of the fuel and falling to the bottom. So currently in my drain hose, there's still glycerin in there because I shut it off early to leave some glycerin in the fuel. But usually the first attempt I will get maybe somewhere around 95-98% of the glycerin out, and the rest kind of sticks on the side of the tank. And in about an hour from now, I'll come back, and that stuff will settle down, and I'll drain off a couple gallons of glycerin with a little fuel mixed in, and so forth. When I do that, I don't put that stuff in the big tote. I usually just put it in a, well, you can see if I back up here a little bit, my dirty 5-gallon pails that are on the floor, and I'll run that mixture because it puts glycerin and then fuel and then a little more glycerin and so forth. I'll put that in a pail, and then I'll just dump the fuel out later, and then dump my glycerin into the tote. Also, while I had the camera shut off, I went over to the control panel, and I turned this temperature switch. I turned that over to 170 degrees, so the boiler is running, heating up the water, and getting the fuel that's in the reactor up to 170 degrees. I also flipped a little toggle switch to auto, and what will happen is when it reaches that 170 degrees, my water cooling system up there, an old air conditioning unit, will kick in, and it'll cool water, and the water that it's cooling basically is going to heat the fuel up to 170 degrees, and over here there's a little air line. Once it hits that 170 degrees, the air is going to start forcing through the fuel, and it's going to push the methanol vapors. I believe methanol will turn into a gas at somewhere around 140, I think 148 degrees, and it's going to push those vapors out the top of the tank. And over here on this cylinder, there's going to be water running through it. There's also a small water pump that's going to pump water through there, and it'll turn those vapors back into methanol, and I'll save about somewhere around 5 gallons of methanol every batch of fuel that I have. And the water that gets cycled through that cylinder, that's what the air conditioning unit over there is cooling, so the water just keeps getting recycled. So I save about 5 gallons on per batch of fuel, and then when I put my 55-gallon barrel of methanol in, I have 60 gallons, approximately 60 gallons of methanol to make my next batch of fuel. My tote of glycerin, when that gets full, I also pump that back into the reactor, and I'll heat that up to 170 degrees and do the same thing, and I'll pump air through it and take the methanol that's left in the glycerin, and save pretty much enough methanol for another batch of fuel. So basically my tote holds about 5 batches of glycerin, and so I'll use approximately 4 barrels of methanol, and I will make 5 batches of fuel out of that, because I save a little bit of methanol from each gallon of, or each batch of fuel, plus I get pretty much a batch of methanol out of the glycerin. So out of those 5 batches I get 1,500 gallons of fuel, and I use 4 55-gallon drums of methanol. I like to, the switch out here that's on auto also has a manual on part to it, so I don't have to wait for it to hit 170 degrees. Once it does, everything turns on automatically. But if I